The New York Giants finished the 2023 season with a 6-11 record and missed the playoffs for the sixth time in 7 years. Their season started off with a 40-0 loss to the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night, and that in a lot of ways represented how their season would go. They won the following week in Arizona in a dramatic come-from-behind win, but would lose 7 of the next 8 games and were 2-8 through 10 games. Within this stretch, quarterback Daniel Jones would suffer a season-ending injury as he tore his ACL in a loss to the Raiders in Week 9. Aside from the Tommy DeVito magic near the end of the year, it was a very forgettable season for the Giants, and pretty much everything that could have went wrong. From Brian Daboll erupting on the sidelines, to a draft disappointment asking fans if they flip burgers when asked about his poor performance, to suffering 7 double-digit losses and everything in between. But now we're in a very difficult situation with the Giants because the simple question of what's next, or how do we proceed from here, is not an easy question to answer. In today's video, we're going to break down why they are in an extremely difficult situation and what they can do moving forward. Now let's begin. We are starting today's video by discussing what the biggest problem with the Giants entering the 2024 offseason is and what will be a problem for them in the 2024 season too for that matter, and it's talent, or the lack of talent on this roster. Yes, they have some very good players like Dexter Lawrence, who I believe is a tad underrated, but for every player like Dexter, there's a lot of players that aren't close to where he is relative to his position. We will get to Daniel Jones in a minute because there is a lot to break down there, but the top 4 receivers on this team in 2023 were Darius Slayton, Darren Waller, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jalen Hyatt, and to at least be fair to Daniel, that's not going to cut it in today's NFL. Darius Slayton was a 5th round pick back in 2019 and has led the team in receiving yards in 4 of the 5 years he's been a Giant, as he averages around 750 yards a season. That's honestly really good value from a 5th round pick, and to have a guy who's been that solid of a contributor to play over 75 games for your franchise with a day 3 selection. But having that be your leading receiver in most years is a bit of a problem in itself. The only year he didn't lead the team in receiving yards was 2021, and you guessed it, Kenny Golladay led the team in receiving yards that year with 521. I like Darius as a receiver and I like his skill set, but again, that's not ideal to have him be your leading receiver in 4 of the past 5 years. The Giants have the 6th overall pick in the 2024 draft, and to be honest, I would be kind of surprised if Malik Nabers from LSU isn't available when they're on the clock, but there's a question of whether or not they would actually take him. Nabers would be by far the team's best receiver since Odell Beckham, but there's a lot of holes on this roster that need to be addressed, and one of them, of course, is offensive line. Evan Neal has been a huge disappointment as a 1st round pick in not just a few games here or there during his NFL career, but since he was drafted. We're now 2 years into the Evan Neal experiment, and he has allowed 82 pressures on 843 pass blocking snaps lifetime, and I've heard a lot of rumblings this offseason about him being kicked inside to guard for 2024, but I personally think that would be a terrible move for both Evan and the Giants. Evan has very slow feet, and that is evident when he plays tackle, and there's gaps he can't close because he does not have the foot speed to get back in time or to keep up with edge rushers attacking outside. But what also needs to be remembered is Evan isn't a 6'4", 320-pound guy either. This is a player who's 6'7.5" and will almost always be giving up leverage inside, which I don't think is a good thing no matter how long Evan's arms are because of how tall he is. Interior defensive linemen can essentially forklift him, and they're not going to wait until after the snap till he's low enough to block them. Evan is at a natural disadvantage due to his height, and I think the best bet is to accept the losses and move on. I don't think Evan is quick enough to be a good tackle at the NFL level, and it's shown every time he plays a premier pass rusher. Sure, he'll hold his own against teams that don't have a good rusher, but giving up 8 pressures on just 49 pass blocking snaps against the Cowboys is a statistical example of how much of a liability he is at times. This belief that Evan will be fine inside is one I personally disagree with because I don't think he's going to be a great offensive lineman in the NFL, and it happens. It kind of is what it is. But the reason we bring this up is because I think the best tackle prospect in the draft in Notre Dame's Joe Alt will be available when the Giants are on the clock. For as much as we criticize Evan Neal, the Giants absolutely got their left tackle right back in 2020 when they selected Andrew Thomas, and credit to them by the way, because that pick was criticized at the time as it was perceived there were better offensive linemen available like Jedrick Wills of the Browns and Tristan Wirfs of the Bucs. But if Joe Alt is available, do you take him or do you try and take Neighbors at pick 6? Or a route we haven't discussed yet, and that's try and trade up to go get your presumable quarterback of the future, who could be Jayden Daniels from LSU. If the Giants draft Joe Alt from Notre Dame and essentially wave the white flag on Evan Neal, then we're talking about a prospect who has to switch from the left side to the right side, which isn't impossible of course, but I wouldn't exactly say that's an ideal situation right from the start. Evan Neal played left tackle in his final year at Alabama in 2021 after switching from right tackle in 2020. It could be done for Alt, of course, but we would be right back to the big question around the wide receiver room. Not only would we be back to the question of who's going to catch passes for the Giants in 2024, but now we're in a situation where Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback in 2024, which has a good chance of happening by the way, but we still don't have a lot of weapons around DJ. Yes, this receiver class is loaded, and I think this is cumulatively the best receiving draft class I've ever evaluated, but asking a second-round rookie to be a number 1 receiver in his rookie year with Daniel Jones throwing him the football is a lot. This is, of course, in the scenario where the Giants take Joe Alt. If they opt to take Malik Neighbors or even Rome Odunze at pick 6, then we basically have the Jamar Chase Penei Sewell meme from back in 2021. The Giants are lacking with skill position players that I honestly wouldn't hate drafting Alt at pick 6 and doubling up in the second round with 2 receivers, because I am under the belief at this point in time that Daniel Jones will be moved on from sooner rather than later. With his contract, he will almost inevitably be the guy in 2024, but the underperforming of Daniel Jones kind of presents another problem for the Giants and why they are in a difficult situation, because I would be shocked if Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen didn't take a chance at drafting or developing their own quarterback. Whenever a new GM and head coach inherit a previous regime's first-round quarterback, it's always interesting to see how they go about handling the situation. By the way, Daniel Jones, just in terms of inheriting him, is a little different than Jim Harbaugh now inheriting Justin Herbert, just so we are clear on that type of situation. The Giants had a lot of success in year 1 with Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll as the quarterback and head coach duo, despite not having a lot of talent on the roster, and DJ was rewarded with a $160 million contract. There are clear limitations in DJ's game, and Daboll was very frustrated with him at times in 2023, and that part was clear. With that being said, I would be surprised if both Daboll and Schoen were content with that and never take a swing at a quarterback of their own. You don't get many chances to run an NFL franchise and to be in this position, and this is why I would be shocked if Daboll and Schoen effectively both go down with the ship and have Daniel Jones essentially cost them their jobs. So this goes back to acquiring talent in the 2024 draft, and I think the war room would be split between Alt and Neighbors. I have mocked Neighbors to the Giants twice in mock drafts on the channel, and we've seen what a star receiver in New York can do for the franchise in terms of the outlook and how the team is perceived when Odell was Odell. I think Neighbors would be the pick, and this in turn would help whichever quarterback would come in the post-Daniel Jones era. I know a lot of Giants fans were frustrated with taking a running back at number 2 overall back in 2018, and it's easy to say that with 6 years of hindsight, but this is another thing that I think is all but given heading into the 2024 offseason, and that's the departure of Saquon Barkley. Saquon has a single season winning in his career at a position that's shelf life is already significantly shorter than most, and I would be surprised if he doesn't ring chase this offseason. In Saquon's lone appearance in the playoffs, the Giants won a close playoff game, then lost by 31 points in the following round, and again outside of 9-7 in 1 year, New York has went just 25-57, and you really can't blame Saquon for wanting to leave and go try and win elsewhere. Hell, he may only have 2 or 3 more years of seriously contributing to a team, and as bleak as that outlook may be for him, that's the reality of the running back position. So in addition to the holes the Giants have to fill this offseason, running back is almost one they will certainly have to fill too, which of course can be addressed, but outside of a few positions, this franchise is in a bad situation. I would argue beating the Vikings in the playoffs in 2022 was one of the worst things that could have happened to this team because it gave a false sense of hope, and 2023 was kind of a reality check in terms of where this team actually is as a franchise. 4 double-digit losses in the first 5 games, with the only win coming over a team that's drafting in the top 4 who didn't have their starting quarterback, kind of shows that. There's obvious dismay on the offensive side of the ball, but I also worry about their defense, and more specifically their pass rush outside of Dexter Lawrence, of course. I know some Giants fans were upset about a draft grade I gave Kayvon Thibodeaux in grading the 2022 draft class 2 years later, which for anyone interested will be linked at the end, but I have concerns with KT moving forward. I know the easy thing to do is look at the fact he had 4 sacks in year 1 and 11.5 in year 2 and say we have a guy and think he's going to get 13 or 14 sacks in year 3 and go from there. But what I can't emphasize enough with Thibodeaux is the context needed around those 11 sacks. Kayvon had 6.5 in 3 games, which were against the Commanders twice and the Jets once, both of which have absolutely horrible offensive lines. Not only that, but KT is a direct beneficiary of playing on the same defensive line as Dexter Lawrence, like Byron Young and Kobe Turner are in LA with Aaron Donald, or like George Karlaftis is with Chris Jones in Kansas City. But Kayvon only generated 44 pressures on 520 pass rushing snaps in 2023 and had a lesser rate of generating pressures in year 2 than he did in year 1 despite the sack uptick. I think it's pretty clear KT will start next year, and I'm not trying to dispute that or anything like that, but this notion that Kayvon is a future star to me is a little far-fetched at this point in time. This doesn't apply to just Kayvon, by the way, but if I ever point something out about a player like this, I would love to be wrong and wish them success moving forward, truly. But Kayvon had plenty of opportunity in 2023 to continuously get after the quarterback, and he finished 8th in pressures from his draft class alone, despite logging more pass rushing snaps than every other player in his class outside of Aiden Hutchinson. Hutch, on the other hand, would lead the 2022 draft class by a mile, as he had 101 pressures, which was 37 more than George Karlaftis in second place, who had 64. What I think is most alarming about Kayvon is the lack of win rate and how he flat out disappears for chunks of games at a time. Now, like with every other player in the trenches, I will say this about Kayvon too. He played his first and second year at 21 and 22 years old, and it generally takes a few years to get accustomed to the NFL, and I'm not saying Kayvon is doomed and he's a bust, because he's not, and that wouldn't be fair to him. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge not hitting home runs on 2 top 7 picks that are entering year 3 in Kayvon and, of course, Evan Neal. The Giants are in an extremely tough situation moving forward because they're going to have to make a decision on their quarterback, and there is a real possibility that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are on the hot seat before you know it. I also don't think this team is close to beating a division rival like the Cowboys with the season on the line, as they were outscored 89-17 by them in 2 games in 2023 alone. I don't envy the position this franchise is in, and I think it's a lot lower than what a lot of people in the media are talking about. The game plan for them this offseason should be simple, and that is to acquire as many good football players as they possibly can. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 29% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.